Saints of the Americas is a series that seeks to share information on the life and times of the saints of the Catholic Church celebrated in the Americas. Your program hosts are Father Jim Corda and Father Jack Lavelle.
Welcome to our show. We're going to start by talking about Father Michael McGivney. And anyone that hears Father McGivney's name automatically knows that he's associated with the Knights of Columbus. So let's talk about the beginnings of Father McGivney's life and also part of his family and what brings him to create this Society of the Knights of Columbus.
Well, like many of the Irish who came to the United States at the time that his parents did, they did so because of the Great Potato Famine in the 1840s. And so they're married in Ireland, but they're married here in the United States after they both immigrate from Ireland, and they start a very large family. He is the eldest of 13 children. But we know that as he's growing, he is a bright child, but in those 13 children, 6 of them die. So we know that it's a family that knows a great deal of tragedy, a great sense of sorrow and sadness. One of the things that was a reality, as I said, he was very bright, was that he then was able to skip a few grades in school. Now, that also would have been very important because as you move forward, there needs to be that opportunity to help out in the family. And so you can only imagine the parents might look at him and think, here might be the great hope of our family, that he might be able to do something to help provide for everyone else. We know that he finishes school when he's only 13, but at that time he expresses a desire to become a priest. One of the byproducts of a large family, but also a devout family, was that his intellect and his curiosity and his faith all came together to have him desire priesthood.
And we know that eventually his father relented and allowed him to go to study to become a priest. So at the age of 16, he enters college in Quebec, Canada, and then seminary in Niagara University, and then eventually in Montreal. It was there that his father dies, and because of this, he comes back to Massachusetts, and he does that to help support his family. And so this change, this kind of disruption in his life, really was kind of the germination and the thought process for him to not only begin this Knights of Columbus Society, but to do so for a particular purpose. And what would have been the reason and the purpose for that?
Well, while many people might not think of this right away with the Knights of Columbus, one of the primary purposes for its establishment was the insurance that is provided. And so it was coming together to create this insurance policy, especially for those who were in dire need. And we see from his own family life, with the loss of a father, you lost the breadwinner. Right. And so you're left with all of these children, you're left with a mother who cannot work. As you said, it meant that he as a young adult had to put his life and hopes on hold to come back and help. So he sees in this fraternity also the opportunity of providing this collective insurance that no one would suffer if this would be what would happen in their family, that there would be funds provided to help take care of a family after the loss specifically of a father, of the breadwinner for each family.
And we know that the bishop at the time, Bishop McFarland, saw several men as potential candidates for priesthood and invited Michael to go back to the seminary. We see that he is given financial help, a full scholarship, so he ends up at St. Mary's Seminary in Baltimore, where he finishes his studies and eventually is ordained at the Cathedral there of the Assumption in 1877. And his first assignment then is in Connecticut, where he quickly becomes very agreeable and amenable to the folks and to the parishioners, and he tries to learn very quickly about their needs and their particular wants. And what kind of draws him to that? Again, this whole sense of destitution and need and the desire to help those who have found themselves in these particular situations. And so we see him starting this society, this benevolent society, and he creates the first council in 1882. And how does it start? It begins small, but then eventually it kind of gets a little better, but then it wanes a little bit, and then it grows. So let's talk a little bit about that progression.
Well, we know that as it was first being formulated, there's all kinds of discussions. It's very hard to just say, let's start something. An idea sounds great, and its purpose and its hopes, but then it has to be lived out. And so we know that there were great concerns about, what would be the minimum age, the maximum age for these insurance policies? What would be the initiation fee? How would the funds be dispersed? So, from this very promising idea comes all of the realities that have to be dealt with. And then, as you said, it kind of has a slow start. But then initially other parishes start to join and start to become part of it. But then we see, as you said, it kind of wanes and grows. And at this time, he's really trying to do his best to hold this all together. He really sees that it's a great opportunity. And so while looking at a statement of its purpose and structure and all that, he develops this idea where there will be a supreme knight and a supreme council, and that there will be this committee and chaplain. So he really does develop the whole structure that will oversee it and allow it to move beyond one person's personality or drive or interest.
And I think he does get kind of a shot in the arm from Pope Leo XIII, who basically writes an encyclical condemning Freemasonry. And so there's these secret societies that the church is encouraging Catholics to be wary of. And so this creation of a benevolent society, which really has high ideals and Catholic values, is really supported through papal encyclicals. And so we see basically by the end of 1885 that the councils grew to 31, and then about 4 years later it grows to another 20 councils. And so eventually through the hard work and tenacity of Father McGivney, and also in light of the whole sense of the hardship of parish priests at the time working very hard, Father ends up getting pneumonia, and he also, it evolves into tuberculosis, and he succumbs to death. And also this society which he started really finds its burgeoning. And so today there's 1.7 million that are part of the Knights of Columbus. And so what started out as a very small seed, like a mustard seed, has grown into this wonderful large society that benefits so many people. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment. The Society of St. Paul announces a new book on Louis and Zélie Martin, parents of St. Therese of the Child Jesus. The book focuses on her parents' journey towards sanctity in their family life and social commitments. This book was compiled for couple and group sharing and is meant to strengthen the journey of all in marriage and family life towards sanctity and holiness. The book can be found at St. Paul's Books and Gifts at 926 Boardman Poland Road on Route 224, located across from the Olive Garden restaurant. The store is open Monday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. or call 330-953-2443 or email at stpaulsbookstore@gmail.com and learn more about these witnesses of our time.
I am Marino.
Yo soy Marino.
Marino, an American Catholic organization of priests and brothers, has been reaching out to those in need for nearly 100 years in 26 countries throughout the world. Missioners, workers, volunteers, supporters, we are all Marino.
I'm Father Mike, and I am Marino.
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 Welcome back to our show. We're going to talk now about James Walsh and Thomas Price. And we'll see as we discuss these two holy men who are on hopefully the road to sainthood, that we find out that their lives crossed at one point and then again later on, and then they create this wonderful community called the Maryknolls. Tell us first about Father Walsh.
Well, as we look at Father Walsh and his early ministry as a priest, to jump ahead a little bit, it's at a time when in the church in the United States, we are still considered mission territory. Now, here we are in the 21st century, and many of our viewers would think of us going out to other parts of the world. But in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we are still very much mission territory. We're receiving large numbers of priests for one reason or another. We get a large influx of Irish priests, perhaps fleeing the famine. We see that with the great influx of immigrants from other countries, that they need their own priests and religious to minister to them. So there's still that sense that we are receiving missionaries, not sending them out. That is something that the young Father Walsh will think needs to change. We know his own experience is growing up in a home of immigrant parents. While he was born in Boston, his parents both came from County Cork. They were married and started a family here in the United States in Boston. We know that James is very bright. He studies both at Boston College and at Harvard University before entering the seminary. We know that after his ordination in 1892, he's assigned to his first parish, St. Patrick Parish in Roxbury, and at that time he continues to see this need to reach out. And so one of the roles that he is given in his early ministry is to become the director of the Society for the Propagation of the Faith in Boston, that need to reach out and to service and minister others. About a year after this, he presents a paper in Washington to a gathering of priests that deals with that very issue about the need to go out and to do missionary work beyond the United States. And you had mentioned that he then crosses paths at different times with Thomas Price. I think this is the first time that happens.
And it just so happens that Father Price was in the audience who listened to this talk given by the director of the Propagation of the Faith for the Archdiocese of Boston. And he was very intrigued by what he had to hear. And so after the presentation, the two of them got together and exchanged correspondence. So they wrote back and forth, spoke back and forth. And then eventually that grew into what they named as Maryknoll. But let's talk a little bit also about Father Price's early beginnings. He was born in North Carolina, and he was born to non-Catholic parents. His father was Episcopalian, his mother was a Methodist. And then both of his parents converted to Catholicism. And of course, at a young age, he felt a calling to the priesthood, and he pursued that and studied at St. Mary's College in Baltimore. While he was in the seminary, he experienced some kind of tragedy in his life where he believed that he was saved by the Blessed Virgin. And so because of that, he just felt this calling to do more with his life as a priest. And so he was actually ordained to the priesthood 6 years prior to Father Walsh was. And he spent many of his years, 25 of his years, as an itinerant missionary in North Carolina. As you had mentioned in another show, the United States, oftentimes, we don't look upon it as missionary territory. But back at the time when these gentlemen were born and grew up, the United States was mission territory. And now these two men, their paths cross again, and they start this whole idea to establish a foreign missions. And so let's talk about that.
Well, it's interesting that in 1906, Father Walsh and a few other priests, but not Father Price, they do establish this Catholic Foreign Mission Bureau to publish books about missionary work and to provide them to the missions. It happens, though, that both of these priests, Father Walsh and Father Price, they attend a Eucharistic Congress in Montreal, Canada in 1910. And so they meet again. And before the Congress is over, in their discussion, discussions and in their exchange of ideas, they start plans for a foundation of a foreign missions seminary to train men who will be missionaries. Not that this will be, an assignment that comes after a parish or after working in an orphanage or a school, but that this is what is going to be developed, that they are going to be trained specifically with the charism of being missionaries that go out from the United States and serve others.
It's interesting because this congregation, through the propagation of the faith, is really supported and blessed through papal orders. And then the priests then eventually return to the United States, where they purchase property in New York overlooking the Hudson River. And Father Walsh names the society, he is the first administrator, and names the society Maryknoll because of its position geographically on a hilltop. The two founders obviously didn't agree on everything, and yet they created this wonderful organization and community of the Maryknoll priests, brothers. And so let's talk a little bit more in our last 2 minutes of our time together about the foreign missions and where did that missionary work take them?
Well, we know that in 1917, Father Walsh traveled to the Far East to select an area for the very first mission that they would be part of. And he chose an area in China. The next 3 newly ordained priests then were sent to China and were to be part of that mission, that ministry. Father Walsh had asked Father Price to lead them and to serve as the superior. And he did and worked in this area of missionary work. And so we see that this continues to grow and flourish. Sadly, however, for Father Price, he has an infected appendix, and he ends up dying while he's in Hong Kong in 1919, and he was buried there. Rather than bringing his body back to the United States, he's buried in their mission territory, and the others return back to the Maryknoll Society here. But we see that that's not the end of their story. They continue.
And it's interesting because in closing, we like to mention that Father Walsh eventually becomes Bishop Walsh. He is ordained, and he, after his ordination, he becomes extremely fatigued and tired, and finally succumbs to death. And at the time of his death, by 25 years after the founding of the Maryknoll, this congregation has grown into more than 250 members with missions in China, Japan, Korea, the Philippines, and Hawaii. And then the two founders are eventually buried side by side in Maryknoll. And so we see the beauty and the wonder of this missionary congregation continue to be spread across the entire world. And as we continue this series, we certainly encourage the folks that are with us to learn more about the saints, learn more about Father Walsh and Father Price and the Maryknoll congregation. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Whether it's passing on medicine, a blanket, or something as simple as a glass of water, that's how compassion works. And that's how Maryknoll works, hand to hand to hand. For nearly 100 years, Maryknoll's been passing on your help to the priests and brothers working in 26 countries around the world. Maryknoll, an American Catholic organization, dedicates 86 cents of every dollar donated to their programs, serving the world's poor and powerless. And that's how it works. Compassion flows from your hand to the hand of someone in need. Hand to hand to hand. That's Maryknoll.
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 That's Maryknoll. That's Maryknoll.
There is a place where a total stranger will give you their blood. A place where someone you never knew will save your child from drowning. Where a person who doesn't look like you, talk like you, or dress like you will give you shelter after a flood. That place is called America, where we look out for each other. When you help the American Red Cross, you help America.
By the time we can walk, each of us yearns for the joy that comes from being able to do for ourselves. Church World Service believes that being self-reliant is a joy everyone should share. So around the block or around the world, share the joy. Church World Service.
Welcome back to our show. Now we're going to talk about Nelson Baker, Father Nelson Baker. He's got this tremendous devotion to Our Lady of Victory, and where does that find its germination?
Well, one of the things that we know about him is that he, as you said, had this great devotion, and it begins as a seminarian. One of the things he did is he made a pilgrimage to Notre Dame de Victoire in Paris, and he promised at that point, he promised the Blessed Mother that he would promote devotions under this title. And so we see that even in his early days before he's ordained, this opportunity to journey and to be part of this whole presence of Mary, it is something he takes on as a personal crusade. And so that's really where it develops, but he was true to his word in this promise.
Well, it's interesting because as a young boy and as a young adult, he's very involved with his family in the church. His biography says that he joined the St. Vincent de Paul Society, so he's very well aware of the needs of the poor and the needy. And then he does join the army during the Civil War and was sent to Gettysburg and then to New York City, where he helped to deal with the draft riots. And then, of course, after the war, he helped in his family grain and seed business. But then at the age of 26, he feels his calling to the priesthood. And that's kind of where his desire to serve the Lord begins, and yet he has this wealth of knowledge and work and desire to help those who are in need. So where does that bring him then?
Well, as you said, it brings him to enroll in the seminary. It's the seminary and college of Our Lady of the Angels. Again, this is when that pilgrimage comes about, that he dedicates himself to Mary about 2 years before his ordination. So not only is there this dedication, but it influences and affects the final years of his preparation. As you said, though, because of these other things he's part of, even after ordination, he's at a parish in Limestone Hill in West Seneca, current-day Lackawanna in New York. But he starts to understand the need to allow this ministry to continue to flourish. And in reality, one of the things that is needed is funds. And so we know that he's involved in orphanages and homes for boys and other areas of ministry of the church. But he is one, and it's probably been part of all of the other saints' stories who are part of religious communities or building parishes. But we know that specifically he excels in allowing people to find their way to support the church financially.
Well, that's really kind of a wonderful call to stewardship, isn't it? That as we try to practice as Christians, stewardship is to be a way of life. And early on, Father Baker certainly found that not only in his own young life, but then as a priest, his desire to experience stewardship and to share that in the lives of his parish family. And so we see that this tremendous fundraising effort and campaign that he embarks on is really to help this orphanage and a boys' home. And eventually he founded what is called the Association of Our Lady of Victory. The donors joined for only 25 cents a year back at the time. But then to keep the donors apprised of all the wonderful things that he was doing, he started this newsletter that's called the Appeal for Homeless and Destitute Children. And so from there, he publishes this newsletter and then eventually this magazine where he expands this orphanage through donations and funds that people are given for his cause. And then eventually we do see him having this desire to build even greater things, but not having the wherewithal to do it. But yet he has this idea about another resource. And so where does he find that?
Interestingly enough, one of the things that he hears is that there have been large deposits of natural gas discovered near where he's located, along the Niagara River in Canada. And so he wonders if perhaps the church's property might also contain one of these areas of natural gas. And so he's somehow able to convince the bishop, we're told, that this is something they need to look into. They contract with a drilling crew, they arrive, they bury a small statue of Our Lady of Victory in front of where all of this work is going to happen, kind of reminiscent of people burying statues of St. Joseph, hoping to sell their house. We know that they dig as close to the statue as possible without touching it. The drilling goes on for months and nothing happens. They keep looking and keep looking. We're told they went down 600 feet and 800 feet, 1,000 feet. And then finally, in August of 1891, a stream of gas shot up from the 1,137th foot dig. And so this large pocket of natural gas is found, and the resources to continue this great building and great expansion of ministry happens.
And we see him really wasting no time building places for abandoned infants, building places and hospitals for unwed mothers, and hospitals in general. We hear that he's built a total of 24 buildings that is responding to particular needs, not only in his area, but around further beyond. And so he also creates this farm that helps to feed people. So all in all, he also enjoins the Sisters of St. Joseph to join this ministry and this charism. We know that when he was 79, he started to build a shrine, and the shrine, I believe, continues today in the name of Our Lady of Victory. And let's talk a little bit about the shrine.
Well, one of the things that we're told is that 5 years later from him first desiring to build this shrine, when he was celebrating his golden anniversary as a priest, the Cardinal of New York dedicates a completely paid-for basilica of Our Lady of Victory, kind of a gift to Father Baker, if you will, for all of his work. We know that shrine, as you said, continues. Father Baker, however, dies in 1936 at the age of 94, and we're told that 500,000 people came to view his casket and to participate in his funeral, recognizing the great gift that he had given the church, and through him continued to dedicate themselves to Our Lady of Victory.
Thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Saints of the Americas was a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program hosts were Father Jim Corda and Father Jack Lavelle.